Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Notes to My Legal Self. I'm Olga Mack. I am your host. This is a place where I talk to in-house legal professionals about all kinds of things. We talk about career, we talk about aspirations, we talk about pivots, we talk about community involvement, we talk about hobbies. We talk about all of those things because in-house legal professionals are humans first, and humans talk about all of those things. And those conversations, we can one, learn from each other, and they make us more rounded. So if you know somebody who can push this conversation forward about career, community, hobbies, aspirations, let me know. I would love to include that person in this conversation. And if that person is you, definitely nominate yourself. I consider it an act of great courage to nominate yourself. Today, we have a fantastic guest. We're going to have a really exciting conversation. Gisele, welcome to the show. I want to talk to you for a long time now. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Olga. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your show. I'm so excited. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. So I'm Gisele Kalonzo-Douglas, and I am in-house counsel to Bethel Gospel Assembly and the Pavilion of the Park. Bethel Gospel Assembly is an international religious organization, and the Pavilion of the Park is the holding company affiliated with the organization, and it holds all of the real estate assets of the organization. So my job is to not only be the chief legal officer, but to kind of be the caretaker, the safeguard for the real estate portfolio of the organization.
Wow, it sounds like an organization with a big mission. And yes, being in-house of an organization like that's a big job. How did you get to it? What were the steps along the way?
Well, my story is a little bit different, I think, from most attorneys in terms of just having a traditional path. So I started law school. I'm originally from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So my family came to the States during very much of political upheavals. My father was involved in the one of the parties in the Congo that was trying to kind of, bring democratic change. And so we left, fearing for our safety and coming to America, looking for the dream as so many immigrants have. By the time I reached law school, I was still kind of dealing with my immigration status. So I was able to do 1 year of law school before that kind of reared its ugly head, and I wasn't able to continue and financially maintain the ability to go to law school. So I had to leave law school while I dealt with my immigration status. And we thought it was going to take 6 months. The law school was very gracious. They helped me be in touch with some immigration attorneys. And we were like, oh, just take a semester off and then you'll be back. It actually took 4 years. So there was a 4-year gap between my first and my second years of law school. So by the time I came back to law school, I had kind of missed the
your class graduated, okay? You missed a lot of things, right?
Yeah. But like the traditional path stuff, so like the on-campus interviews, all of that to kind of be on the track to be in a firm, right? So, and I worked full time and went to law school. So when I left law school, I actually went immediately into criminal defense firm, but they were looking to merge with a civil firm. And so I came in to kind of be that bridge and that gap. And so this organization that I currently work for was a client. I was just reviewing contracts for them. Then in 2006, they were one of the first religious organizations they sold their air rights to a developer, and that yielded some property for them. And so that was very novel in New York. Now it's a little bit more commonplace, but at the time it was very novel. And so as I was looking to transition and actually move out of New York, they asked me to come on board, and because they were growing and were looking to create this role, and it kind of was one that has grown from nothing into what it is today. So I think what got me here was just being open and saying yes to an opportunity that presented itself.
Yeah, what a rich history. I was listening to your story, immigrating from Congo and, dealing with all this stuff, having a full-time job, they go through law school. It's kind of reminded me of my story. I immigrated from Ukraine, similarly for political reasons. Similarly, got myself to law school. I did go straight through, but I had had many jobs throughout college and law school. And it really gives you Okay, I guess maybe one a different perspective and appreciation of what it means. What a huge opportunity it is to get a law degree in the United States. Period. Um,
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
yeah, for me, it was a couple of things. One is that in my where I come from, I might not have even gone to college. But
Mm,
two is because you really see, and I'm just curious. This is where I'm curious how you view it. You see the role of law as being very important in the orderly society, and
right.
you see, you really, at least I saw, I'm doing important work. No matter what I do with law, I am
Right.
doing. I'm part of law, which is an important mission. Like, how did that make you feel, given in kind of the background in Congo, which different from Ukraine in kind, but not
Mhm.
in flavor, but not in kind.
Right, right. No, absolutely. I feel the same way. And there was no one in my family who had been an attorney. So I was the first. And so it really did come from such a sense of, you get such a sense of right and wrong, a sense of justice. And even though, I wasn't like a prosecutor or anything, but just doing things the right way, doing things that help people just became very much ingrained in me.
I think for me, being in law is sort of a privilege. And no matter what I do, private sector, public sector, government, it is a strong statement in supporting orderly civil society, which I think is a sort of fabric that makes things possible.
Absolutely. It is a privilege. And that's why, 17 years in, I'm still excited every day about the work that I do. It's not just a job, it really is part of, who I am. I've just had to learn to navigate it a different way so that it doesn't take over my identity because I'm layered, as we all are, right? We have different tiers to us. And so during this process and part of this conversation that we're going to have has been about finding those layers, developing them and having them help me be a better attorney.
Absolutely. You had a key conversation. Tell us about the conversation. Tell us more about this conversation, and because I want to frame this discussion, what it means to be a full person and live up to your potential as a lawyer. What conversation did you have that was important in your life in reflecting how you show up as a lawyer?
Right. So in 2019, I was with my son at a football game. He's very cerebral. He's not necessarily into sports. And so I kind of dragged him because my husband couldn't go. And we're sitting there watching the game and he's kind of laying on me. And he asked me, what did I want to be when I grew up? Like when I was a kid. And I'm like, oh, I'm doing it. I'm a lawyer. And he kind of looks at me. He's like, well, what's your more? And I was like, wait, what? He's like, well, what's your more? And I'll tell you, Olga, from that moment, I've become focused on figuring out because I was like, this little kid, he's challenging me in a way that I haven't challenged. And he was so like nonchalant about it, but what's your more? But it hit me profoundly.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's something about your children putting a mirror in front of you,
right?
That is really powerful. That in the different ways that happens to me in some of my conversations. I have two children of different personalities, and it's really powerful because you really want to be the best self and prepare them for the world. And when they kind of put it back at you,
right?
You like it's an important question for me, but it's also an important question for me to answer to you so that you can be a productive member of society. Tell me how you thought, like what did this question mean to you, and what was going on through your head as you were having this conversation with probably like one of the most important people in your life.
Right. So my immediate response was, wow, that's a great question. And I am going to think that through and come back to you. And I've actually had the opportunity to go back to him and remind him of that conversation and what I've done about it since. So in the more immediate space, I really was thinking it was about my work, that he was asking me like, hey, are they professional aspirations that you have, goals that you have to become, to kind of rise through the ranks and get to a particular level. And so in the immediate, again, I was focused on that. I was kind of looking at my job, or what can I do that's more? What can I do that brings me more money? Is it more, stature? But I realized now that was such a limited view of that question. And so It took a while. I guess I was a little bit slower than I thought.
No, it's just, I think that's a big question, and it takes some processing and reflecting. It's not a question that it's a knee-jerk reaction for most of us.
Right.
So, did you find your more?
Well, I'll say this.
Sorry, I did not mean to put more pressure.
No,
What his job there, but I'm just curious. What like the suspense is too much. Like what happened?
Right. The short answer is yes. I found my more, and I realized that my more is not in my work. It is in the totality of me, which includes my work. And so I realized that the mirror was held up to my face. I had to look at myself from all angles, including professionally. And I did the work. I challenged myself to say, well, for me, more was also just in terms of excelling, because that's how I internalized it, because I felt like I had reached a pinnacle in terms of my profession, but can I get better within it? I've done this for so many years, but can I still every day learn something more, push the envelope a little bit, improve in some way? And so I just, for example, this course on leadership coaching at Georgetown, and I had a coach working with me on my leadership style, my empathy or ability to empathize with my staff, how I communicate with colleagues. And I learned so much about myself during that process, because I think sometimes we think, especially if you've been doing the work for so long, not that you know everything, but you're like, I've done this enough that, I got this in the bag.
No, it's my dad, who used to work with the minors, used to say people who are new, they're incredible, they're sponges and all of that, and people who are like really at the end of their career and know they're obviously good, but it is these people in the middle who are in the dangerous category, because they know enough, so they have a lot of confidence, but they actually don't know everything, so they're the most dangerous. So that sort of reminded me of that. You said a couple of things that I want to follow up on. One is you use this phrase, it's the totality of me.
Yes.
That I'm not just a lawyer. There's just so much more. Curious, kind of like why don't you tell me more about that? And how did that impact the way you approach your job and your life?
When I was in law school, I remember a girlfriend and I talking, and we were focused on, when you introduce yourself to people after you graduate, are you going to say, I'm a lawyer or I'm an attorney? And we were like, ooh, if you say I'm an attorney, it just sounds so much better, right? And so we were just focused on that, right? And so, I realized that even as I became a mom and a wife, I was very work focused. I have 2 phones, an iPad, constantly in response mode, never shutting down, shutting off. And I realized that led to mental fatigue, and it led to some resentments of my work and a little bit of loss of joy. And it's something that I worked so hard for. And that's why I shared the story about that gap of 4 years, because I waited and toiled during that time because it was so important to me to be a lawyer. And so I was like, how did I get to this place where I've lost that zeal and I've lost that joy? So I need to recapture that. And so I feel like in doing the work and figuring out what kind of lawyer I want to be, because that was also a question that a mentor had asked me once, what kind of lawyer do you want to be? Not in terms of what area of practice, but just what kind of lawyer? Do you want to be one who's responsive to clients, one who is, or one who's overworked but doesn't really get anything accomplished? Like, figure out what it is that you want to do. And so I found my joy again in the work,
nice.
And that's something that I had lost along the way, didn't realize that I was phoning it in every day. I see the difference in my relationships with my colleagues, where it's like, hey, let's brainstorm. Like, I think they see me now with a little bit more excitement, whereas I know it's sad to say, but there was a time I'm sure they didn't get that.
That's really interesting. Yeah, having joy is important. You mentioned that you worked with the coach, and I want to kind of ask that, because some people are more open about it than others. So I'm grateful that you're open about it, and it sounds like that was a very productive experience, and perhaps even pivotal experience in the way you kind of got to your understanding of self. When did you realize that you could benefit from coach? And was it like a hard decision for you to sort of accept coaching?
No, it wasn't hard because I realized I got tired of hearing my own complaints, like just the rah rah, I was just like,
I'm just got tired, sick and tired of my own voice. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I did, because it wasn't moving me further. And so I was stuck. I felt like I was stuck. I knew that I was stuck. And I was saying to myself, Gisele, and that's when you're general counsel, right? Or the chief person, or you're an attorney general, or whatever profession. If you're the person from whom the decisions come from, it's hard for you to realize, this I can't do. And so it was humbling, right? To say, hey, I want to get a different perspective because what I've done is just not working. And so the coach, shout out to Gary, was just wonderful. And he was very clear on saying, this is not therapy. This is really to help you hone those professional skills that you have, the tools that you have in your arsenal to just be able to do better and to do more. So we would have conversations, like I said, in terms of, it ran the gamut from how I converse with upline, people under me, the board that I serve, what those communications look like when I have challenges, because you'll see that there are patterns sometimes in your professional career, things that kind of repeat themselves and stall you. In part of that was relational for me. Just understanding how different people work, meeting people where they are, not getting frustrated when people think a different way, and then realizing that I was also evolving and they needed to receive my evolution as well.
I want to talk about this, getting to you more, because it clearly was a process. Tell me what lesson was most important as you are going through the process of maybe working with a coach, asking the questions, thinking how you're going to come back to your son, coming back to your son, after you had a clear answer to yourself. What is the what are the most important lessons on that journey?
So far, what I've learned is that joy piece is critical. And it's not like this, I'm happy to go to work and get up every day, but just a sense of fulfillment and pride in the work that you do. I think if you feel any kind of shame or embarrassment about what you do, then you're not in your more space. And so gaining that fulfillment at the end of the day, like, okay, we didn't save the world, but I accomplished something that I'm proud of. Something else that was very important to me was the creation of boundaries. I realized that I had this idea in my head that I had to be all things to this superwoman attorney, and the woman piece was important because there was always this, the men dealt with differently than the women were being dealt with. So, a man could kind of like separate the job from his personal life, and it was actually okay, and it wasn't an indication that he was slacking or anything. So I just felt this pressure to always be on, always be in work mode. But I had to create very clear boundaries about what time I worked, what time I didn't work, when I was available. And then I think the third thing that was a refrain throughout from the time of law school until now is that delayed is not denied. And they've been professional goals that I've had that have taken longer than I thought that they would be, but doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And that throughout the waiting period, you have to continually work on yourself, make yourself better, to make yourself more marketable, to make yourself, more indispensable, to make yourself of add value.
I love that. I'm going to have a couple more questions. I'm going to grab onto this, delayed is not denied. I'm going to linger this for folks to think about. That is like you said it among other things that were super important, but I would say that's like a nugget of gold. Delayed is not denied. You can, just because you didn't get it today doesn't mean you never get it. Doesn't mean, you may choose not to get it, but it doesn't make it less valuable. And in fact, it actually may make it more valuable because the timing may be better. You actually will gain something in the process of learning. I thought I was, how did you get to that? Delayed is not denied.
There have been many. Remember, I talked about these patterns that kind of show up in your life at different times. That's been one that has repeated itself in my life. From having to wait for law school to finding this job that kind of met my needs in a lot of different ways, flexibility to be a mom, ability to move and still, be productive part of the team. And so there would be moments where I kind of viewed myself as not as successful because I hadn't gone, again, that traditional route of being in a big firm and that becoming partner and that whole thing. And so and a lot of my coach put it this way. He said, if you went to a party and you started talking to people about what you do, would they ask you, did you go straight through law school or did you have a break, right? He was like, you've put this thing on yourself and then diminish your success because it didn't happen in a prescribed time frame. But who gives that time frame, right? And so it's been a lot of affirmation that I've had to kind of go through it myself that, hey, everyone has a different path. And if yours is a little bit more curved and not straight, it doesn't make it any less valuable or less interesting.
It's very interesting. Yeah, we do care. And we as humans and we as lawyers carry this heavy weight, this backpack that not only defines the what, right? Mm-hmm. Like I should get this and this and that, not just a list, but the timing, right? Yeah. The when. And how quickly, right? It's just so much more that we put on ourselves to carry. And we don't have to do that. And there may be just different paths. And I love this, delayed is not denied. And then, that backpack that you choose to carry, you actually can make a choice not to carry it and have a totally different view of who you are as a professional, as a lawyer, as a mother. I'm curious because I want to take this conversation for around. You made this journey from Congo through very traumatic time to United States, having dealt with other things like in law school of immigration and our immigration system that is interesting. To being a powerhouse attorney. Leader, mother, thoughtful contributor to society.
You're so good for my ego, Olga.
Oh yeah, I mean it, and yes, I intend to stay friends with you for a long time.
I appreciate it.
Tell me, how is your past shaping, connecting you to where you are today? Because I find that I immigrated when I was 12.
Mm-hmm.
And that Ukrainian girl who was facing very limited opportunity and with a certain chance to go to college is still there.
Yes.
And I'm just curious kind of how you, who, went through, again, similar in kind, different in flavor experience, how does that shape you?
So I came to the States when I was 11 years old, and I wasn't able to go back to the Congo for 35 years. And the first time that I went back to the Congo was in 2019 with my son and my American husband. And the feeling that I had when I landed, and there's this video that my husband took of my dad and I at the airport, the best way that I can explain it is that it explained me. It was like being there. I was like, oh, Gisele, you make more sense now. That there were these cultural aspects to me that had been ingrained in me, that had shaped me, made me who I was, that I couldn't necessarily articulate and name them, but that I felt when I got home. And I was able to go back earlier this year in January, and it felt it even more so. I visited my old elementary school, went to my old house. And when I tell you, the boost of confidence that gave me, because I saw where I came from and where I was, it was wrapped up in a little bow. It gave me such adrenaline. It gave me such fire. And so there are things in my personal life that I'm doing because I feel like there are other little girls in other places who need opportunities, and it is going to be part of my more to make sure that those girls have opportunities, have a platform. I just recently, and through my church, I'm starting an organization, Just Us Moms, to help mothers who have, who want to advocate against gun violence in the wake of the recent shootings. That's not something I've never been interested in being involved in politics, but I was just moved to that place. And I think it's been just a growing and an escalation of everything that I've been through to get me to this, and understanding that it's so much more about outside of us than it is about ourselves.
Yeah, well, I'm going to comment on two things. One is that those of us who may or may not be in politics can be really moved by an issue, and that may change everything. That happened to me. I was advocacy for women on corporate boards a few years ago. But I thought, what I want to talk a little bit about is, so I've never been back to Ukraine. And I think it's an act of courage to go back. Right. Because it just, at least I am an overthinker, I'm sure. On the one hand, excitement, on the other hand, I'm worried because, I immigrated around the same time, and I'm now, and in many ways, a true California girl. But in many ways, I'm obviously a product of where I come from. And then there's a sort of a lot of fear and anxiety, especially when you don't live on your terms, right? There is sort of a process of going back and kind of accepting where you come from. And so I've been close. So I've been in Poland and I've been in Baltic, so like Russian speaking. And every time I come closer, I kind of experience what you experience, right? This like, oh, that explains, some kind of my people, right? This is my church. I even if I don't understand Polish very well, but I feel those people, right? So, but I never actually had the courage to cross the border to Ukraine. Now we were actually going to do it this summer. We didn't for obvious reasons. But it's funny. So your husband sounds like he was very aware that this was a big, important event for you. He videotaped you, and you had now opportunities to go through that experience, watch yourself go through that experience, and now understand how important that experience was for you. And so, and one of the things you said, it explained me. Yeah. Tell me more. What do you mean by that? Going back, explain me. How? What do you mean by that?
Well, I got to know Congolese people, and this obviously generalized, but very resilient people have been through so much, right? Imperialism, have been through, where the DRC is one of the richest countries in the world in terms of natural resources, but the people are some of the poorest on the planet. But that joy that I talk about, we would drive down the street, people just have smiles on their faces, they have hope, and I'm that person. And I kind of sometimes would think to myself, when I would be that way, what's wrong with you? Can you look at your circumstances, But it came from that. I'm also a woman of faith, so that's interspersed in there. But just that sense, that resiliency, that ability to wait 4 years to finish law school, that hopeful nature. And then because when I was leaving the Congo, I remember this guy that worked for our family told me that in America, all of the streets are paved in gold and everything costs $9.99. I don't have a clue where he got that from, right? But then when we landed in New York, we were in the Bronx in November.
I'm not sure about the gold, but $9.99 is true, Gisele. It's true. He's right about that. Come on.
And he said the streets were paved with gold, but I've come to understand that he was just talking about you have opportunities, right? It wasn't a literal. It took me a while again to figure that out.
I was going to say he's at least 50% right, but maybe in your interpretation, he's actually maybe 100% right. Okay.
Right. It's all about the perception. So the perception is, you have these avenues and these opportunities that other people wouldn't have. And so when you talked about how, as an immigrant, you understand the value of being in the law, I feel like when opportunities present themselves to me, Olga, I take them. I really do. When you wanted to talk, I was like, great, because this was an opportunity to talk, to share, to hopefully impact one person. And so that's how I'm driven.
I love that. And I really, I see a lot of leaders on LinkedIn. I ask essentially, I ask people out all the time.
Yes. Great day, Olga, so far.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. It does lead to some interesting conversations, and I've seen different reactions. And sometimes it brings up insecurities. It actually brings a lot of insecurities. I would ask like really top lawyers, and then that question will bring like all kinds of insecurity. I'm like, I'm not meaning to be that person. But I am great. I actually was really grateful by the way you responded. It's well, one, made it easier, but also that you signaled readiness to share. And I really love that when I find the one person, because I'm like, oh, this is a good timing. The person is mature and ready, and I ask not too early and not too late. Like I really love that, because that leads some of the best conversations. And I really love this conversation. And thank you for sharing your immigration journey and your kind of journey to more and kind of all various struggles. I would come into the end. I am really grateful for this conversation for many reasons, including because it's you living a parallel life and your sister from a different mother in many ways. So thank you for that. What is one thing you want listeners and the viewers, of this conversation to take away? Like if they get nothing else, they get in the middle of this conversation, or they really just kind of want to get one nugget. What is the one thing that you want them to kind of carry with them as they move through life?
This is something that I learned through even the coaching. And you talked about having the courage to kind of speak. So I would want everyone to remember, you have a story. And yours may not look like mine, but you have a story to tell that can definitely help someone else. I think that if we all had that same mindset, understanding that, what I do can have impact for someone else, my God, what kind of world could we possibly have? So this is really not courage for me. It's really having come to this understanding that I have a story that is my own experience, but that I can share it with other people and it can have some impact. So don't be afraid to share your story in whatever space, because you have spheres of influence, and within that small space, you can really make a huge difference.
Gisele, thank you so much. This was a fantastic conversation. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. I knew I would enjoy it. I just didn't know how much. And this was, I planned for 100. This is to like 1,000. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining this conversation. I really love Gisele's message that you all have a story. And yes, Notes to My Legal Self could be a place to share it. I find that when folks share about their journeys, whatever that may be, they may or may not be, a journey like Olga's and Gisele about immigration. They may be things in advocacy. They could be things in the community. They could be things in your career, your hobbies, whatever. I find that it helps at least another in-house professional and inspires and gives them tools. So if you want to join me, or somebody who should, nominate that person. And remember, I consider self-nominations to be an act of courage. My other takeaway is the delayed, not denied. I think that's a fantastic way to go through life and consider opportunities and your goals and what you want. I'm going to hold on to that. I think it's a fantastic guidance and phrase that I think would be helpful to anyone. With that in mind, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate your participation and you finding the time to be with us. We'll be back with more next week. And thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye, everyone.